Hi, everybody. Welcome to another session of Design Your Future in UX. We are so excited to have you here today, and I have a great panel with three of our excellent Designlab mentors who do freelancing and contract work out there in the real world. For those of you who are Designlab students and have attended some of these events, you know my spiel that's about to come. Say hi in the chat. We want to see who's here. We want to know where you're joining us from. Hi from London, Milwaukee, Tampa. Hello, hello. We're so excited to have you all here. Today's session is an Ask Me Anything. And like I mentioned, our hosts or our panelists here have all worked in the freelancing space or in the contracting space. And we're very excited to take your questions and get those answers today. I came with some questions to get us started. I know we're all like a little lobster in the pot. Sometimes we need to warm up a little bit in every event. So we'll go through and introduce ourselves here as we're to kick things off. But before we do that, just some real quick housekeeping. Y'all know the chat. I'm seeing you in there. Welcome from Vancouver, San Francisco, Tucson. As we go, because this is an Ask Me Anything, please be sure to pop over into the questions tab at the bottom of the navigation bar on the right-hand side there and add your questions. I will keep an eye out and I will look for the ones that get the most upvotes and make sure that those are asked live here in the session. This session will be recorded. I will say it again at the end, but it will be recorded and it will automatically be sent to you. It will also be housed in our blog. So without further ado, let's get going, you guys. So I am your host and moderator. My name is Jessica Campbell. I am the Career Services Program Manager here at Designlab. And not to brag, but the mastermind behind the May event. No, obviously that was a brag. My background is in recruitment, creative and technical recruitment. Thanks for the laughs, you guys. I also have I've gone through the UX Academy, so I have a bit of a product design background as well. So I will be leading us through this Q&A today. And I'm going to kick it around a little popcorn style to our guests. Elizabeth, you're on the top here. Would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and how you got started in freelancing?
Sure. So my name is Elizabeth Morello, and I've been a designer, for over 20 years. So for quite some time. And I started in freelance kind of out of necessity. After I graduated, I moved to sort of a smaller beach town that didn't have a lot of, large design firms or large corporations. So I sent out some packets with my resume and, a link to my portfolio. And I was fortunate enough to get a small design firm to hire me on as their interactive designer. They had been designers for a long time, but they hadn't made the switch over to digital. I know it's hard to believe that there was ever a time when digital didn't rule, but they had been doing print work and industrial design. So I was really fortunate. It was a great experience. So.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And Caitlin, I'm going to kick it to you now.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Vargas, and how I got into Designlab and freelancing. I actually started freelancing in 2017. My first gig was like at a coffee shop. I really loved the coffee, and I went straight up to the owner and I was like, "Do you need an app?" And of course, I didn't get the gig because they were looking more for like a developer. But it was such a great learning experience. It was like I wanted to do this, and then I officially got my first gig at a nonprofit in Laguna Beach. One of my mentors handed it off to me because she didn't have time. So I did that. And then how I got into Designlab, I was I already had a background in tutoring and mentorship. I did it for my college. So when I applied to Designlab, it just kind of worked out for me. So that's a little bit about me and how I got into Designlab.
I love that. Thank you so much, Caitlin. And Raphael, to you, bring us home. Hold on, make sure you're off mute. Wait, oh no, I can't hear you. Hold on, I can't hear your mic. Let's see. Okay. Well, nope. I know everyone's crying. Okay. We're going to wait for you to chime in. I'm going to give Raphael's brief overview while we wait. And then as soon as I hear him speak, I know he's back online. But Raphael has worked with Designlab now for a few years. We have worked closely together, helping students and what
about now?
Yes, there we go. I'm like, oh no. I'm going to do you such a disservice. Woo! All right, you take it from there. You've worked with Designlab for a few years now.
Yes, it's been 2 years, I think, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Being short things, I'm from São Paulo, Brazil. Right now, I'm living in La Paz, Bolivia, 4,000 meters above the sea level. So we don't have much oxygen here, which is really weird. But anyway, I have I have a background in the university, like academic degrees, web development and linguistics, two opposites, right? But since I'm talking to everybody here from Texas, St. Louis, and Jessica, and everywhere, I think it made a lot of sense at the end of the day. I worked around 15 years with digital marketing. Okay, the last 6 years was all about marketing of performance, which is numbers, selling, clicks. And just like I say in my presentation for my students, I was getting bored. Okay, I was getting sick. I was getting probably depressed or something because I wasn't doing something for me. Of course, pay the bills, have the money, and take care of the house, let's say. But it was all money for everybody else except me. All the glorious moments for everybody else except me. So I thought, I took a step back and I thought, what can I do? That would make me not only happy in the sense of doing something on my own, but happy and fulfilled about my creativity, because I wasn't doing something for me. So getting back, I got back to my web development world and started training everything related to UX. But as I was like a Lego, how do you say this? Lego techniques, right? Lego robotics for children, teacher for children. I was English teacher, Spanish teacher, Portuguese teacher, English for people with visual impairment. So I just merged two things, being a mentor and Designlab, but also having my agency here. So I can kind of balance Designlab that I can help. I don't like this word, but help, the the mentees, getting their a better life professionally, but also having my projects so I can choose what I want to do and what I don't want to do. And that's it. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, and we're so glad that we actually were able to hear your intro from you and not from me. And okay. Hopefully we all stay toggled here together. But thank you so much again, everybody. I'm super excited to get, and we already have so many questions. So I'm just going to skip my pre-thought of questions. I'm so glad you all just came super prepared. I guess you weren't lobsters. You were just like already cooked, right? Came ready. So I want to kick it around to, let's see. Someone had a really great question. I thought was a good one for kicking us off, which is, oh no, where did my questions go? Caitlin, I wanted to kick this one to you to start us off. At one point in your career, and you sort of talked about this, did you decide to freelance? But also the second part of this question is it realistic for someone who just graduated to start in freelancing?
Yeah, I think it is. Short version. When I first started freelancing, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a mentor or people to tell me what I was doing wrong. So like finding someone who has previous experience will get you that one step forward to freelancing in my opinion. But you could start with like nonprofits, you could start with local businesses. Like for me, I love working with like those moms and pause shops. I like working with local businesses. That's my go-to. And I think everyone who is like a UX designer or a UX designer can go and look for those moms and paws in their local area. I think there's like a lot of chances to reach out to people and just start networking. I think networking and community is super important, especially when you're first like graduating and when you first after graduation. Sorry. So like I think it really is possible. You just have to like kind of change your mindset and kind of like find your goals of like what you want in freelancing and what is your audience. But yeah, of course, that's the short answer.
Yeah, I'm curious, Raphael or Elizabeth, do either of you have another thought on that that you particularly want to chime in on? Elizabeth, I see you thinking.
Yeah, I agree with Caitlin. Going to nonprofits and small businesses is a great way to start and get experience. And, you know, if you're willing to volunteer your services, which I know not everybody, you know, is in a position to do, but that's a really great way to get maybe a slightly more recognizable nonprofit to hire you on. And then that gives you some, you know, a really nice portfolio piece that will hopefully help you kind of build on that. So.
Yeah. And Raphael, how about you? Do you feel like this is, you know, getting into freelancing either right away or sometimes folks even kind of start doing this as they're graduating? Does that feel possible and realistic? Like, have you seen any of your students do it?
I think it's totally possible. Just to share my experience, I decided to go to freelancing before it was too late. Let's say I was doing the same thing for maybe 6 years. Okay, dealing with clients, answering clients, doing something that was not creative, and of course, the bills were being paid, right? But I wasn't happy. So the freelancing, of course, we're probably going to discuss this later, but the freelancing, it's also a lot of responsibility because when you go to your office, you just go there and you deal with the problems, let's say. So the clients are there, the tasks are there, and just solve them, right? But when you are a freelancer, you are your own manager. You pay the bills, even the health insurance, you know, and all those bureaucratic things. But I think at the end of the day, at least for me, in my opinion, it's worth it because I have this kind of freedom, you know. So let's say next week I need to go to São Paulo to visit my family. I don't need to ask, you know, and cry to my boss, hey, I need to go, please. I'm sick, I need to go. So for the ups and downs, I prefer being freelancing. But if it's okay to start right now, yes. I also recommend to my mentees to try some freelancing work to add into their portfolio. Because in an interview, they're going to ask, hey, this case studies here, they are wonderful. And they were real clients. And then you have a gap, yes or no. And it's better if you can tell a real life story with real challenges. So yes, if you can do freelancing right now, just do it.
Yeah, I think the rounding consensus is yes. absolutely you can do it. And I certainly know I've seen students, because we get like the outcomes data coming in, reporting freelancing roles. This sort of came up kind of in context there. And Elizabeth, I'm curious to kick this one to you, since I know you've worked with a lot of different clients and both in-house contracting and some freelancing. How do you, the question is, how do you get a stable income and get new clients? Sort of how do we balance this? Because I can imagine freelancing for a lot of folks here or in general feels very scary and like not as, to this question's not as stable, right? So how do you get a stable income and new clients?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it kind of varies for everybody. The one thing about design is that everybody has a slightly different experience. I have gotten most of my clients through just good old fashioned like job postings. And a lot of times, especially lately, probably in the last 10 years, I've noticed that, sometimes you'll go for an interview and then they'll just tell you on the spot, this is a contract role instead of, a W-2 role. So the other thing too is that if you work with someone and you have a really good rapport, they oftentimes will call you back to work again. And they become more of a, sort of a regular client. I had someone that whom I worked with at McGraw-Hill, and then he got a job at another educational company. And then, he hired me over there. Another thing to do too that I noticed is like my first UX role was an educational app. It was many, many years ago. But once you sort of you work in one industry or with one type of content, oftentimes that will then, kind of lead to more apps and more projects in that field. So yeah, that's how I've done it. Yeah.
Unmute me. And Caitlin, as a more consistent and like regular freelancer, I also want to get your insights on this. How do you balance that stability and, bringing in the new clients as projects are wrapping?
That's kind of a hard question because it just goes in waves for me. Specifically, I think everyone has different experiences. So like my advice would be like always reach out to potential clients, and to do that, I mean, for me, I do it through networking. I do it through Facebook. And I know Facebook's kind of like an old thing to not use anymore, but that's where I get my clients. But my demographic for clients is people who are a little bit the older folks, who don't really know about UI UX and don't know about websites. And so like I partially educate them and teach them and then do their work for them because they don't necessarily have those skills. So like to have like a stable income, I also like reach out. I also do like side jobs for myself as a freelancer, because sometimes you have to do that. But yeah, that's my answer.
And I would also argue that all three of you in some way have Designlab as part of your like stable, right? Your stable like income. And I don't know if if my screen keeps getting bigger for everybody, I'm sorry if it is doing that. It's doing it on my end. I'm trying to make it not. Hopefully you see us all equally sized here. Yeah, I think, here we go. I think it is a tough question. I sort of think part of it with freelancing is are you comfortable riding that wave? I would almost even kind of flip that question on its head. Are you comfortable riding that wave? So we have a lot of like logistics questions coming in. Folks are which makes sense, right? Folks are very curious about kind of budgeting tools you guys use, how to set a contract, how you set rates, things like that kind of generally. So I want to sort of kick this question to each of you. because like that's the biggie that are coming up for folks. So let's start with, how do you guys manage all of the like logistics that come with running your own, like either managing your own contracts, managing your own 1099 billables? So things like taxes, your health insurance, like are there any apps? And you don't have to get into specifics of how much you guys pay or anything like that. But like, are there tools you use? Are there ways you manage that within your week, etc.? So Raphael, would you mind starting us off with that question? How do you manage the administrative of freelancing?
It's a totally valid and important question. We manage the tasks, the clients, the bills, the tools, the house, uh, grocery stores and garbage and drug stores and everything like that. We need to deal at home. I think it's something that comes with being a freelancer. So when you are starting, you don't have this idea like, hey, I'm just going to talk with the clients. Everything is going to be fine. So I'm going to do the work. I'm not going to get the money and I'm going to be happy. Yeah, sometimes it happens, but not often, right? So yes, I have a contract, actually many contracts, like websites, UX, branding, marketing, social media management. So I have different contracts. It's like having a template. So I change things here and there. And this contract, you probably can find online, but I would totally recommend you to recheck with a lawyer, with someone in your family that understands laws, like, hey, this is valid, this is not valid, and okay. Things that I think they are important for you to add in your contract. Start date, end date, basics, right? Resources. What are you gonna create or do, and what the client is gonna provide you. So this is the moment where the bridges, or they stay good or they collapse, right? So responsibilities, start date, end date, things that you are not gonna do, like, hey, I don't do this. So if the client asks, you are backed up by a contract. Things that you can do, things that you can add to the task. Like in the middle of something, hey, we can add this. What do you think? Yes. So we're gonna pay more for this. So try to have a contract backed up by a lawyer or something that you can provide security, not only for you, but for the client too. Okay, it's not about protecting you all the time, but also trying to provide a good job. Okay, because sometimes also with the mentees, there's a clash with what you want and what you think is right, what the client wants and what the client think is right, and actually what the project needs. This is the hardest thing. You start discussing things, and after a certain point, you need to give the ball to the client. Hey, okay, I'm gonna do what you want, but okay. These are my recommendations, especially contract for the project, and of course for health insurance. You can pay by yourself. You can find someone that helps you. Um, Health insurance, taxes, of course, the same thing. If you have anybody in your family that can help you, any friends that is close to you that can help you, I would suggest. I have a mix. I have contracts, templates of contracts. I pay personally for health insurance and those things, and I have accounting to help with those taxes. That's what I do.
Yeah. So it sounds like rather than managing any of those particularly yourself, for you, it makes most sense to get that outsourced, like legal professional, accountant professional, etc. And that makes sense. I'm curious, Caitlin, do you do anything different, or is that kind of your same mode for managing those?
I kind of do the same. The only thing I make my own contracts, more so just like it doesn't go through anything illegal. because they're for like small businesses. It's more so to protect the businesses and myself. But I agree with everything that Raphael said.
Yeah. Elizabeth, same on your end too.
Yeah, when I worked with smaller businesses, I felt like contracts were a little scary for them. So, we worked out the details, but it maybe wasn't as, kind of legally binding. Then when you work as a contractor, they usually send you the contract. Yeah, I usually just, I know this is probably not, the right thing to say, but I kind of go by the situation. If when I first started out, I was working with smaller businesses, and I really felt like a lot of them had never used designers before. And I felt like if I whipped out a contract, that was just going to be like, oh, yeah, no, thanks. We just wanted a logo for our small business. We don't want to, sign our lives away or anything like that. So I just kind of used my own sort of feeling about the situation, and if it didn't feel like I needed one, I didn't have them sign it, or I just kind of we mutually agreed upon what the deliverables would be, when they needed the project, how much it was gonna, how much they were gonna pay me, and I did all right with that. So, I know that that's probably, like, making some people cringe a little bit, but, um, I just kinda used my own feeling about, what I thought the client would react to.
Elizabeth, flying fast and loose over here. And, and I think I think that's why I'm curious to hear where things are, how people approach this. I think there are tools out there, but it's interesting to hear from this group of folks who, I want to be very clear, like freelance and contract and work with clients in this mode a lot, don't try to manage all of these things themselves. They stick to the creative elements that they love. And I want to highlight that because I am seeing questions in the chat here, or in the questions tab. And I want to give a reminder because I see some questions popping into chat and I can't monitor those ones. But about like what software tools do you use and et cetera. And it really sounds more like that's not the mode y'all take. You use a trusted human with the professional experience to get all of those things set up for you and eyes on. That's the part where a bit of the spend, the cost is worth it. And I'm seeing nodding all around. One of the things that came up in this conversation that we have a question around is, Raphael, you were talking about this, but I do want to kick the question to somebody else to answer first, which is, what is a good way to estimate how much work a client project would require, right? We talked about setting those parameters, setting your boundaries. And I actually see this with students with volunteer work too. They walk in and get a bunch of requests. So I think this applies to anything, even a full-time job. How do you estimate how much work a client project would take? And I would say, yes, this does come with experience over time, but what are your tips for a newbie for figuring this out, or somebody new to freelancing? Caitlin, I would love to hear your answer on this.
Okay, actually, I have a good example. So I recently got a new client. She hasn't signed the contract yet, but it's pretty much in. I don't usually do flat fees. I usually do hourly because it's easier for me to determine the work. But she wanted to do flat fees. So I went ahead, did a flat fee, and I was like, okay, how do I like break this down? I needed to know how long it was going to take me, or how long I wanted the project to last. Does she need branding? Does she need she wanted a website. So did she need a responsive website? How long is that going to take me? Do I know the platform she is going to be working on? She's going to be working on WordPress. Do I feel comfortable enough? There's a lot of things to kind of like determine how how you're going to take on this project. And that kind of determines on how much you're going to estimate on the project, like the project of how much it's going to cost you or cost the client. So like for me, I've worked in WordPress. I have web development background. So like I know how to code, I know how to manage WordPress, but it's been such a long time for me that I've worked in WordPress that I didn't feel comfortable charging her a lot that it's like normally around like web developers and stuff. I kind of undercharged myself only because I wasn't comfortable working with a client. I wanted them to be happy. That was my goal. Is like I want this client to come back to me. So my goal is to make the client happy, and I think that is something that you need to like really consider as a freelancer is what are your goals for the project? Is it to build your portfolio? Is it to make a new client? Is it to just to practice on something, a new skill? So there's like a lot of things to consider, and I think how much like confidence you have in yourself with that project also is something to consider. Like I said, I don't really like doing flat fees. Hourly is my go-to. Even if it takes me about a week and I get $100 or something, it's still my go-to because it doesn't require me to estimate how much each individual thing will go into a project.
And that makes sense. And I actually kind of want to expand on that because there also are questions around rates. And I don't want y'all to get into like specifically what you charge, but I am curious, Raphael, I want to kick this one to you. Is your preference, Caitlin, yours is flat. Raphael, do you do like or not flat, it's hourly. Raphael, do you prefer flat or hourly? And then if you can expand upon that, how do you decide what that number is going to be? Are there any resources or tips for how you figure that
out? Excellent question. I agree with everything Caitlin said. Okay, I agree with everything. What I do is kind of a mix. I have a start date and an end date. Okay, so it's not like, hey, it's gonna be more than 3 months, but we had a deal that it would be like 1 month. No, I have a start date and an end date. And I agree again. The question was how can you calculate, estimate the hours? First, you really need to be honest with yourself and your skills. Okay. Of course, it's a good thing to start doing everything that comes up. It's okay. You're gonna learn, but know your skills. Hey, I'm gonna create a website, but okay, do you know WordPress? Do you know Elementor? Do you know Webflow? Do you know Wix? Do you know Squarespace? What do you know? How can you do this website? How can you create? Second thing, yes, the deliverables. Okay, so what the client's gonna provide you? So you're gonna create a website. It is responsive. Do you need to create a branding? Yes or no? They're gonna give you a branding. The text, they're gonna give you some text, or you're gonna have to create pictures. Do they have pictures? Do they have a contact team? Do they have an email to contact? Try to create first a checklist, like those Nielsen and Norman heuristics. Create a checklist with things that are really necessary to create a website. Even hosting service, right? Some clients, they have no idea. They just don't know, and it's okay. It's our job to teach them and to do the job. So some of them, they are going to ask, what's the difference between domain and hosting? Okay, it's basic for us, but maybe not for them. But take notes. They don't have this, they have this, they don't have this. And from there, knowing your skills, you're going to calculate the hours. Okay, there is no magic formula. There is no like, hey, to create a logo, I'm gonna require like 1 hour. Who knows? Maybe you create a logo, the client isn't happy. You create a second logo, the client isn't happy. You create a third logo, the client isn't happy. And then you ask, hey, what do you want? A flying banana. Okay, you create a flying banana and you check. Okay, it happens a lot. So it's a mix. What I also suggest you is to have some extra time for unpredictable things. Life happens. We get sick, someone in our family gets sick. You need to go to the grocery store because whatever, you need to visit someone, you need to go to the sign some papers, whatever. So try to have some extra hours there, so every single work doesn't be like a burden. It needs to be good for you and good for the client. That's my opinion.
Yeah, super helpful. And I actually want to build on that and pass this question to you, Elizabeth. Some folks are kind of nervous about what that first meeting looks like. So, right, we've got some of the deliverables here. We've talked about flat versus hourly rate. What are kind of the next steps, for those who are like, how do we even, like, okay, so I found the client, what do I do? Do I start with just a long meeting to talk through all of those budgeting things? Is that provided in an email? And then what does the kickoff call look like? What are the logistics of getting up and running on a project?
Okay. So you want me to, it's me, right? Okay. So
you, Elizabeth.
So if it's possible, I do like to meet with the client either in person or online. If I'm working with, in recent years, I've done more contract work, but I do occasionally do a freelance project with a client. And I do like to talk about what I listen to what they're telling me about what they want. Um, One thing to keep in mind that I think is really helpful is that a lot of clients aren't going to know design terminology. They're not going to be as fluent in design terminology as we are. So instead of asking them to articulate kind of what they're looking for, I like to see, if possible, see what they like. Show me some things that you really like so that I can actually see what you're looking for instead of, just listening to you try and struggle with the terminology. And then, I do usually ask them what they need, what the deliverables will be. And, in recent years, I've actually started because I did go through, kind of the struggles of trying to figure out how many hours things would take and estimating. I sometimes will just come right out and say, "Hey, do you have a budget for this project?" And so that gives me an idea of, you know, what I can do for them realistically. Because, when I first started out, most of my clients wanted a flat rate. I think that if you're a smaller business, you don't like the open-ended, oh, I'm paying this person by the hour and it could go through the roof if I'm not careful. So I did, try and work out a flat fee, and I will admit that I worked off the like kind of off the clock for many hours after because I was building a portfolio. And in my mind, I think Caitlin kind of touched on this too, is like um I wanted to do a really good job. I wanted them to be happy. And I sort of chalked it up to it was a learning experience. I was kind of learning the ropes. And so now I'll just ask, if they had a number in mind. Talking about money, I don't know how other people feel, but that is the worst part of it to me. Trying to put it into dollars and cents because, I just think that's awkward in any profession. So yeah, I think it's nice to have that established before you go into the project. So.
I absolutely agree. And I think that's almost why, like, just from my 2 cents, like as a recruiter and having dealt with the budgets on the other side, right? I always get numbers out of the way almost in the very first call.
Mm-hmm.
Like not the first question. It's a little bit much. But I do always like to align in a friendly way. Like, hey, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. This is what I'm looking at. Is this what you're looking at too? Do our expectations of what I want to be accomplished align with what you can accomplish and how you value your time? Yeah. And I even think, Elizabeth, to your point, I do think this was another thought of yours, Caitlin, right? As like, what's the goal, right? Mm-hmm. The goal was to learn and build your portfolio. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like, where are we coming at with all of these, you know, with the approach to how you're deciding these things? And I think if you're keeping your North Star true, that will help you guide all of your conversations, the way you set your rates, etc. And to get a little explicit on how I would look at rates, I would recommend folks go to Robert Half has a salary guide. Now that's a salary guide. Yeah, but it's a good place to start because you can usually take a salary guide and add about like 40% for freelancers, because you have to accommodate for all of your taxes and things that you're going to have to pay. So just Robert Half has a good free updated every year salary guide that I wanted to throw out there. Now, there was another interesting question that's over here and gotten a lot of upvotes, which is many small business owners don't know what UX UI is. Elizabeth, you touched on this, but Caitlin, I actually want to kick this one to you because you mentioned in your I know I'm taking it from one person and moving it to the next. But Caitlin, you mentioned in your intro that you like to work with folks like who don't know what they're doing at all. You know, they're on Facebook for a reason because that's their website. So they don't understand UX UI. How do you market the service? How do you describe the deliverables? Like, how do you go about educating them and selling what we do?
I think it's like terms. So they know more for example, people who work who are in Facebook, they know about websites. They know what a website is. They know what an app is. They just don't know what to do with it. I think it's just terminology where like UI UX, we call it, and back in like seven years ago, it was web design. Okay. So it's just in terms of like kind of knowing the UI UX department, as in like what are things called and how you use your words to communicate. So like for small businesses, for example, yeah, they don't know UI UX. They don't even know what a user is. They just know they have clients they want to make happy and something's failing in their business. But you could point that out to them and you'd be like, hey, like I had a client who they had like about 1 million like users, and they didn't want to do user research, but I pushed for it because I was like, I really think like, what is your goal for your business? Is your business to like what is the goal for your business? You want to improve your users to get off of Facebook and go to your platform, because that was their main issue. So I was like, I think we should talk to the customers. I think we should get their opinion. I really think we should. And I just kept pushing. And I eventually got like a survey and interviews from their clients, from their customers. And that's how I think anything you could make anything into UI UX. You just have to, what I like to call background engineering. And what it is you, like, let's say I had a client that just wanted a website. I did their website. There was no users involved. But I wanted to do more for that project. So like I researched what their market was, what their competitor analysis was. I made user personas for them. And then I could put it on my website and say, hey, it's a case study, because technically it is a case study. It has all the information you have for UI UX. So just because the project itself is not really UI UX doesn't make it you could still make it into a UI UX case study. You just kind of have to go about it. But like for small business owners, it's more of like a push and pull relationship. You kind of have to teach them the terms of UI UX, and you kind of have to be patient with them because they don't know it. I think patience could go a long way. Some business owners just want the thing to be done. And that's the reason, like, this is one of the key reasons I love working with small business owners, is because they're not as knowledgeable, but they give you a lot of freedom. they will be like, I just want it done. I just want this website done. Do whatever you need to do. And so like I have this freedom to do whatever I need to do, whatever research and personas and whatever I need to do, get this thing done. And they're always happy with it. So like I get what I want by doing UI UX within a website, and they get what they want, which is the final product.
That's really interesting to think about, that perspective, like who are the users of, like, who are these folks who don't know and don't have the websites yet? Like there's like websites aren't a new concept. And there are a lot of tools to make it pretty easy to make websites for a while. So why do they still not have them? Like, what is that persona? Yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I talk about this with my students too, is that if you're working with a small client, in my experience, sometimes they're very production oriented. So I had a client ask me one time, how long does it take you to lay out a web page? And I was thinking, this person doesn't really know that laying out the web page, there's a lot that happens between, our first conversation and actually producing a web page. So I do think that sometimes, even when I was just first starting out and I was a web designer, I was making wireframes, scribbling out wireframes, scribbling out a user flow and a sitemap. Unfortunately, I just recycled them afterwards because nobody cared back then to even see the process. But I do think if you come into a meeting with a smaller client and you've got like all these deliverables, you've done all this research, and you have all of these things, it could educate them, but it could also make them a little bit frustrated if they don't understand why you did those things. They might, in their mind, they're thinking ka-ching, ka-ching, like I've been paying you to make these maps. So I do think, like Caitlin said, you sometimes, what you're doing for your side of things, is up to you, and then you're producing what the client wants. And we all know that doing those things makes the project much, much stronger. But maybe they don't always have to see like every little thing that you're doing, because I think that if they don't understand, that might frustrate them. And we all know that if UX, UI, if that is really solid, that's gonna make their product better, and they're going to increase their revenue. So that's the great thing about UX, is that it's very compatible with a higher profit margin, more users, etc. So, I mean, that's just my 2 cents on that. So.
Absolutely. I love that. And Raphael, were you also indicating that you had a thought on this too?
I agree with everything. What I can add is, besides knowing your skills, that I just said, hey, know your skills, know yourself. Try to understand the client. Okay, so try to understand their goals. Maybe you have something in mind. Hey, I can see this coffee shop. You're gonna put some smoke and animation and a movie in the background. It's gonna look so great. But actually, maybe the client doesn't want it. He just wants something to present to the clients or whatever. So try to understand their goals. Okay. Of course, we at Designlab, we learn everything, and it's perfect because then we know how to do everything. But sometimes the client just want this. Okay, so try to understand this. And they asked about the rates, how much to charge. Yes, I think this kind of thing you need to get solved in the first meeting. Okay, in the first meeting, talk to the clients, understand their goals, deadlines is really important. How much time do I have? How much time do you have? And in between, yes, you're gonna have to ask the budget. It's kind of uncomfortable, but after a while you get kind of used it. Try to understand their budget, and try to understand how far you can go to adjust to it. Okay, I don't think being 100% strict is the best solution. Okay, know how much you need and how much your work is valuable, but also try to understand this. You cannot charge the same thing for a, a, a local burger shop than for a local uh, market, that has many brands around. So try to have this balance, and that's it.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that piece back up. That's a good shout from that earlier question. I agree in that nuance when you're looking at, if you do choose to look at that Robert Half resource, it actually does scale it by like 25%, 75%, 95. And yes, bear in mind who you're talking to when you're thinking about the budget. So we're getting towards the end. I have one last question, especially for this group, right? Like of humans who are attending, because Designlab is about, right, UX, UI, and we're not necessarily teaching the coding or dev skills. And we are very clear that that's not necessary to becoming a product designer. It's not a required skill. However, I have heard in the conversation here, a lot of you have some of those skills. So for our students who maybe don't have that, don't have the HTML, don't have the CSS, don't have the coding experience, how would you hand off or explain that to your client? Here's what I can do, and here's what I'm going to have to hand off to you for another human to do, for a developer to complete. Caitlin, I'm curious. I know you're like, it's coming to me. I'm curious how you would manage that.
So when I work with my students, I always, and I know like Designlab doesn't require it, but I think it's super important as a UI UX designer in general to learn how to communicate with developers, to at least understand the basics of HTML, CSS. You don't have to know what they do. You just have to understand like, what does a head do, which is a header, and like a footer, and all those kind of like terms in web development. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to, like, if you're a freelancer, you basically do everything yourself, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to develop it if you don't know code. What you can do, and it's kind of a little bit tricky, is that you make a friend with a developer. Maybe it's someone who is just starting out. You give them a rate like, hey, I have this client. You could tell the client if you want to. You could just say like, hey, I have this client. I'll give you $30 to do this website or something. I know that's really low, but that's just an example. And then you go to the client and you include that $30 into your budget. So when the client pays you, you pay that money to the developer so they could develop the website that you design. That is one way. The other way is to include specifically into your contract, like, I'm only doing the design. You're going to have to find a developer. I'm just doing the design work for you, and completely like make sure the client understands that. Super important, because if they don't, then you're going to find yourself in big trouble and like going to have to like find a way to get this design piece onto a website or app in your own way. But that's the best advice I could give.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, Elizabeth, because a lot of the times you're doing more like contract work with clients. How would this feel like differently, like working with bigger clients versus, maybe the mom and pops?
Yeah, when I first started out, I know I'm going to date myself by saying this, but there was something called Dreamweaver, which was it was a platform comparable to Webflow. I won't, I'll just say that it allowed someone like myself with a design background to actually develop a website, because it was kind of a drag and drop. So I used to do the development myself. And sometimes, the client would ask me to do certain things, and I would, find a way to do them. There weren't as many resources as there are now, but I was able to build, a basic site when responsive came along, I found that it was just a little too complicated. There were different languages that were being used. JavaScript, which I think is just too complicated. Or for me personally, I just don't want to learn that. When you're working with a bigger client, it's kind of understood that you're working on a team a lot of times, and everybody on that team has a purpose. And so there's usually a developer that, it's understood that you're going to hand off things to the developer. And having a good rapport with the developer and kind of getting to know the difference between a designer and a developer, kind of the way they approach things, is helpful. I think that could probably take too long to go into the minute details on that, but yeah, definitely it's kind of understood with when you're working on a team that there will be a developer, and you want your work to be as easy to hand off to them as they're the user kind of in that scenario. So you want to make sure that you're considering them the same way you would, empathize with an outside user, and make sure that your work is easy for them to follow and understand. So.
Absolutely. And I want to round it out and get your final thoughts on this as well, Raphael, before we wrap our session, again, because there are a lot of concerns about like, well, how do I even approach this if I don't have the dev skills? What are your thoughts about managing that relationship with clients if what you're bringing to the table, which is hugely important, is the product design experience? How do you position yourself with that?
I agree again with Elizabeth. I use it with Dreamweaver too. Okay. And I can see some of my students here and they probably have no idea the struggle. Okay. I tell them, hey, today is so easy. Do it. Okay. Find some time, learn and do it. Because back in the day, it was really, how can I say this? Raw, and I don't know, block it. I have no idea the right
Clunky.
Yes, clunky. It didn't work back in the day. Okay. But getting back, first, communication, be clear with yourself and your clients. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I cannot do, but this I can find someone to do and I could put in the price. Okay. For this, again, another advice, recommendation or advice is too strong. Try to have a good networking. Okay. I know that sometimes we are very introverted, and I always recommend the book Show Your Work, from Austin Kleon. We are always an introverted person. We don't want to interact. We don't want to deal with that guy, that girl, whatever, but try to have your connections. Okay. If you don't want to be a coder, I learned, probably just like Elizabeth, how to code, and I didn't like it. I didn't want to spend my days with two black screens coding. It wasn't for me. So I try to have someone in my network who can deal with if a client requires to. But again, the client doesn't necessarily knows what is coding, what is UX, what is UI. So my first recommendation is try to have a clear communication, as clear as possible. If someone, your argument needs to be understandable by someone who has 15 years old and someone who has 70 years old. Okay, you have to do the same. Some people understand, some people don't understand. Hey, this is UI. They don't need to understand what UI is, but visually they need to understand. UX, they don't need to understand what UX is, but they need to understand the concept, what it's for. Okay, and for this, another hack, I call hack because sometimes it's the only way. Try to show them how much money they are losing because they are not investing in UX and UI. Okay, try to say, hey, how was the last time you used it online in banking application? Oh, yesterday. Were you happy? It's probably no. I wasn't happy because it's too boring. So imagine how much money the company would win if they had a good UI and UX. Okay, so communication, assertiveness, and know yourself and know your client. I think these are the best things for now.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We walked right up to the time, but you guys had so many great questions. I know we did not get to all of them. So if you would like, please connect with our hosts on LinkedIn. Remember to be kind with their time, but they're happy to connect with you. You're also welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're not a part of the Designlab courses yet, and you're curious about signing up, we are offering an exclusive career coach session for our June cohort. So if you're interested, please sign up. But either way, we were so glad to have you here. Thank you so much to Elizabeth, Caitlin, Raphael. I appreciate having you here, and I love the insights. I think this was extremely helpful. We have 2 more events to round out this series next week, and I hope to see some of your highs and hellos in the chat there. But thank you, everybody, again, and have an excellent rest of your day and week. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Yes,
very much.
thank you, everybody.